you've each heard each other's presentations, and they were all very different. But if you could kind of name one point that one of the other presentations, or that you learned from the other presentations, how that would interact with the presentation that you had and the work that you've been doing. Maybe that would be a good place to start. Who would like to volunteer to go first? And this on? Can we get this one on? Okay. All right, that one works. Okay, recycling.
Right off the cuff, I think one thing I take away is we have to do something.
Mm-hmm.
It's clear evidence. Whether you're feeding the hungry or feeding the naked world or helping communities, it's a matter of doing. And I come from sort of the operational side of working in the food banks, and I've just noticed within food banks we have a program, people who run, come up with the ideas and things, but actually it takes people to get it done, and we're learning a lot here about the different aspects of food, agriculture, and my mind. It's like I was talking earlier with Timothy, it's almost like we need a shepherd to bring all the elements together. It's one thing to have a panel and discussion, but how do you operationalize it?
Mm-hmm. Okay, great, thank you.
One thing I was reminded, see the chart on real quick, that was really impressive to me. And it's kind of this success story that's emerged. And I need to learn more about. Actually, a colleague who was Gates actually made me aware of that, but I haven't really seen the full chart.
Photosynthesis sucks. And that's the good news, because there's so many ways we can do better with them.
I think the presentations all reminded me about the importance of small farms to solve the issues that are coming at us in regards to feeding people globally. We need to have agriculture at all scales, and I think often small farms we don't remember how important they are, whether they're taking place in a city or in the countryside. They have an incredibly important role to play.
Okay, that's great. So what I'm going to do now, most of the questions I'm getting are addressed at one particular panelist, so I'm just going to kind of go through them and give each panelist one of the questions. So let's start from the top with Timothy. Timothy says beef was a big issue, but would we be in the same dire straits if we got rid of beef and had more dairy?
No. Dairy is also resource intensive, but it is far, far less resource intensive than both from a land use standpoint and emission standpoint. But it is interesting that vegetarians consume, we think, actually there are very few real studies, but we think vegetarians consume like 2/3 of the total consumption of animal products of the average American. So when people talk about this, it has become a little bit of a magic asterisk that would solve these problems by a massive dietary change. And we realize that only a certain percentage of people are vegetarians, and even that would actually do it. That's
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so for Andy, I'm going to ask this question. What's your take on companies such as Imperfect Produce, which seek to distribute ugly produce? And does that have any impact on the work that you're doing?
Does it have to be diplomatic?
Sure. No. We don't require that.
It doesn't. There's two things going on here, right? We have American dream business models, right? And so how can you say to an entrepreneur, don't do what you're doing because you're harming the potential food source for us? I'm not of that ilk to say that. I think anybody who's into the marketplace, and there are many disruptors. I mean, we've seen what Uber has done to the taxi industry, right? Is it right, is it wrong, or is it just is? And I look at these imperfect produce, ugly fruits. There's a multitude of companies all over the country like this. Does it make our job a little bit more challenging? Sure. I mean, we're competing for some of the same resources. But I know a farmer needs to stay in business. And if a farmer's not in business, then we're not getting any produce at all. So the short answer is it really doesn't bother us. And in fact, it's probably beneficial because it helps keep an agricultural industry alive. And we just have to work harder and more efficient and looking at other ways to find food.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, the next one is for Rachel. We're going to ask Rachel about indoor vertical ag in urban environments. And how does that work, and is that something that can be done?
Yes, it can be done. We are seeing some indoor vertical ag, a little bit in California, and I think in other places around the U.S. It's a little more technology driven. Something I didn't get to is that the majority of urban ag that we see in California and primarily around the U.S. as well, it's not high tech. It's not aquaponics or vertical or anything like that. It's just regular old in the ground growing. However, there are these emerging models like vertical agriculture. They require more upfront costs. They require more technical expertise. So they tend to be operations that are a little bit better financed, sometimes startups, and they tend to be less likely to be farms that are about feeding people in the neighborhood and increasing food access. So I think they're very interesting. And one other interesting thing about them is I think some of the technology in terms of lighting and hydroponics that you start seeing a lot of now in urban agriculture was actually developed in many cases by the cannabis industry, and I think we'll see more of that used now that cannabis is legal in California and other states, and also sort of more interactions between the emerging cannabis industry and the urban agriculture industry.
Great. Okay, thank you. So for Robert, the question is, you talked about a lot of the differences between some countries, and you cited particularly the Southeast Asian versus African countries. Can you talk about to what extent that is political differences? Is there something that has to be resolved politically? Is it a cultural, social phenomenon? How would you characterize it? Why did they do differently?
It's 100% political.
Okay.
It's quite simple.
Okay.
It doesn't matter what your politics are. You can be a dictator, you can be a democracy, or anything in between. What matters are the policies you follow, whether they drive agricultural productivity, whether they're equitable. And let me just comment on the question, where is inequality first? And it illustrates the difference between equality and equity. Ethiopia actually was one of the most equal countries in the world for a long, long time. They still are, but it's gotten worse lately. They've become less equal. But they used to be almost all equally poor, destitute, and in horrible condition. By applying development and equity, they've actually driven their equality a little more divergent, but rode the curve up to where even now the worst off in the country are much better off than they were when everybody was equally bad, if that makes sense.
You just led right into a follow-up question, and that is, what changed in Ethiopia to make things suddenly go from being in the same situation to a dramatic transformation, or at least the beginning of a transformation?
The political leadership. So the story about Meles, the dictator, prime minister, who brought developmental economics. And when he came to power as the prime minister, he put in place a very logical, tried and true agricultural-based development effort that led him to the progress you saw in that graph.
Great, thank you. Okay, next question is for Andy. And here's the question: is partnering with logistics experts like Amazon a viable option? Have you tried that, or is that something that you've worked on?
It is something that we are actually talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Amazon is a partner of Feeding America. They, of course, are getting big into the grocery business, and they have warehouses in various locations throughout the United States. And they have product that they donate, and we're leveraging that into conversations about logistics. It's only in its infancy, but we also, Walmart Corporation is one of the biggest donors to the Feeding America Network in terms of food and dollars, and they have finance in some logistics teams too. So that said, we are working with various organizations as well as we're just starting to talk with UPS about the last mile. I know New Mexico well, and so there are 3 counties in New Mexico that don't have a grocery store. So for us to send a truck down there into those counties, it doesn't make sense from an economic point of view. And so the hunger need is still there, and how do we meet that? And so we're just starting to talk with them about possibilities.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Okay, we're going to go over to Rachel now for this question: how can a community start efforts for urban farming? Should they reach out to city hall departments first, or organizations such as UCANR? How can a community fight against overdevelopment using urban agriculture? Maybe those are 2 different questions.
Okay, I think if you're in a community that you think would benefit from urban farming and you want to get involved in that, definitely our website is a great resource for how to get started, but where you should really connect locally is if you have a local food policy council. Food policy councils are great organizations where people are organizing to push for healthier food systems in a variety of ways. And urban agriculture is often one of the things they're working on. So they've probably already identified some changes that can be made in your local community and are already acting on them. And they often have working groups around urban agriculture that you can join that can help you get organized in your local community. So that's where I would suggest connecting. And how can a community fight over development using urban agriculture? I think working again through groups like food policy councils to convince your city elected officials and sometimes county elected officials that there is value in having open land dedicated to urban agriculture, to educate them about all the benefits that brings to communities and encourage them to use it for urban agriculture. Oftentimes cities own plenty of vacant property, but they're kind of holding it so that it can be used for development because that's where they get property taxes. So the only way to encourage them to use it for other things, like the city of Ontario has done in supporting Puerto del Valle, is to encourage them and educate them on all the value that open land can bring as an urban farm. Cities already see the value of parks, so why not help educate them on the value of using publicly owned land for the public benefit in the form of urban farms?
Great, thank you. So we're going to next turn to Robert. Is it worth funding development projects in countries with misguided leadership? That's a loaded question if I've ever heard one. Okay.
No, seriously.
Uh-huh.
If you look at where has a lot of development aid gone, and what is the outcome been? This is a hotly debated topic. Got books like Dead Aid or White Man's Burden or something like that. Where people arguing governments like Tanzania and Kenya in Africa today, you saw have made no progress. They're just feel-good efforts. You spend the money, status quo persists for decades. So how the money is spent makes all the difference.
Okay, great, thank you. Now I had a question for Timothy that I'm having a little trouble identifying here. It was up a little farther down, I think. Yes, goals would require strategic planning to achieve them. China's good at long-term strategic planning, democracy's less so. Please comment.
Well, China, of course, is overwhelmingly the largest agricultural country in the world. And right now, from a agricultural management standpoint, it's one of the worst in terms of, not the worst in terms of its yields. Its yields are staggering. I mean, they feed 4 times the American population, 2/3 of the agricultural. But in terms of their environmental performance, gross overuse of nitrogen fertilizer, almost completely unmanaged manure. They just literally dump the manure directly in rivers, and their fertilizer manufacturer uses coal, which is even that expensive. So their greenhouse gas emissions from the chart, and so they have not paid much attention to the environment, and I think countries that do pay attention to the environment tend to do it right. Having said that, they can certainly make decisions to go another way, so they decided for a variety of reasons that they would become a global leader in fuel cell manufacturing and solar cell manufacturing, and they now dominate the market. So the question for China, I mean, I actually played a couple of talks in China, Professor Hong, on could they want to jump? The government could just decide, hey, let's jump and become leaders in innovative technology, and that is the kind of opportunity. China has done a lot of reforestation from kind of really, really large agricultural land. And that has had some benefits. From a biodiversity standpoint, it's had no benefits because what they've been doing is making these sterile forest plantations. So, yeah, you do see a huge scale. There's no similar money out of reforestation recently. So, yeah, it's interesting to understand.
Thank you. I would point out that in some of their solar work, a lot of what they did was buy American companies and then take the technology and create a mass technology or a mass production system for that technology.
They do spend a lot of money on agricultural R&D.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge part of their driver. And they have some terrific scientists working on the final elements of agriculture too. But it hasn't yet really turned into action.
So we've only got a couple of minutes left. So I'm going to ask if each of you have one question you'd like to ask of any one of the other panelists, would be one thing I'm going to ask. And I'm also going to ask each of you to say if there was one key takeaway from what you had to say to us today, what would that key takeaway be? What would we put in a word cloud if it were to come out from you? So Rachel, looks like you're thinking about starting. Do you have a question for one of the other panelists?
I do. I would love to know, you talked about history, like how do you feel that urban agriculture sort of fits in terms of the historical issues that you discussed?
Yes. Sorry.
I think it's a brilliant continuum. If you think about it, farming the land around your hut was your urban space. And so it all starts small. And we can keep going back and doing that.
Okay. And do you have a question that you want to ask? Mm-hmm.
So I have a quantitative question. Just how big can urban agriculture?
That's an excellent question, and we don't necessarily know the answer to it. There have been some research significant portion of the food that an urban area needs if you use, available land but those kind of models don't take into account a lot of important information like cost of land, is that land even available? So we don't really know. There's not a lot of great information on how much food urban agriculture produces. There's also not a lot of great information on how many urban farms there are in the U.S. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, as you probably know, does an ag census every 5 years, and they count the farms in the U.S., but they don't make a distinction on which are urban farms. So there's a lot we don't know about this movement and this phenomenon in terms of quantifying it.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so Timothy, let's turn to you. And do you have a question for one of the other panelists?
I guess, yeah, for Robert, because he's kind of doing something closely related to what I work on. So what do you think is, what do you think is the role of large private food companies? And should we focus on that, kind of big international food companies?
Well, you're going to be sorry you asked. I came from industry. I love industry, and industry is a big, dumb blob. Like water goes downhill. And the way you work with industry is to put dikes and dams and pumps and stuff. It's all government policy and infrastructure. So you shape the landscape, and industry will do brilliantly downhill. We make downhill the good direction. So the question back to you is, can we use conservation subsidies and carbon equivalent taxes to shape the landscape, or is that a pipe dream?
Is that my question?
Sure, go ahead.
So, yes-ish, in that, clearly it's going to take a whole range of policies. So it's a big question to ask, but it isn't, you can't deal with agriculture in the same way you deal with the energy sector of just putting the price on the carbon. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One is it's really hard to estimate. You can't go around measuring the carbon emitted by every capital. And so there's huge ranges of uncertainty. And in the case of land use, it's even harder because the carbon content of land varies a lot with natural circumstances. And somebody else can burn down your forest. You should probably be responsible for that. So you need surrogates. And we need the kind of the most technology. We need the policies that are as flexible as possible. So I gave you the example requiring fertilizer company giving the kind of target for increasing the efficiency of the fertilizer, giving them the flexibility to do that. So that would be an example. And eventually, maybe we can tax beef, let's say, in developing countries, and do that. There certainly are ways to deal with land use. Maybe be responsible for New Zealand, for example, people are responsible for basically chopping down forests. So we need to kind of follow the most flexible approach, but it's going to be sector by sector.
Okay, Andy, do you have a question?
Sure. This would be for Rachel. Feeding America's tagline is solving hunger. Right now, we're a Band-Aid. And listening to all of our discussions and more to come, I'm sure, is basically how are we going to solve not only hunger, but feeding people in the future. And one of the things that I'm realizing is with more and more of our food being imported, less manufacturing going on in the United States, I often think about this island in Greece that's named after Icarus, where people still grow their own food, live to be 100, and 80-year-old, 90-year-old woman would fall into the hen house house to get ready for the morning. And I think, do we harken back to the day where we grew our own food? Not victory gardens per se, but the ones that really will sustain us. And so, my personal thinking is, in order to solve hunger, does local farming, does urban farming have a place that can actually solve it versus just dogma?
Okay. We can keep this pretty brief because we're running low.
I think it's part of a solution. I don't know that urban farming could ever be the solution. I think the power of it is that it can be done on the individual scale or by small groups of people in sort of whatever little scrap of land is available. So I think its beauty is that it can help people supplement what they have from other sources or don't have from other sources. So I think it's a toolkit, if you will, of addressing hunger.
Great. Thank you. So now, in just the last minute, I'm just going to ask each of you to give us a phrase or a sentence that kind of encapsulates, and I know this is a terrible thing to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyway, that encapsulate what you would like people to remember from your presentation.
I got the microphone. Andy didn't get a question, so my phrase is return on investment. What's the dollar value of the food you rescue versus the dollar cost to rescue it?
I don't know. I do know for every dollar we get that provides 5 meals. I do know that. I do know that for every pound of food we receive that feeds 0.7 people. So, but the dollar amount that we invest in terms of helping our 200 member food banks and what they spend, that's a great idea.
It's a great question. Okay, so do you have a phrase or a word that people would like to, or phrase or a sentence you think people should remember as the most key thing from your presentation?
Technology is a tool. People make it happen.
Great. Thank you.
That's it, taking the global challenge really seriously.
The ability to grow your food is always going to be important no matter where you live.
Great. That's a wonderful way to end it. Thank you all very much for being here this morning. And thank you to our panelists.